Well, good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Very delighted to once again be joined by Dr. Silkman, a proper scientist, all the way from Adelaide in South Australia. Not like Ken Kratz's fake image on Twitter. What a clown! What a
Unbelievable.
clown! Yeah. And do you know
That's
what? Do you know?
unbelievable.
Do you know what the surname Kratz comes from?
Well, tell me, Paul. Tell
It's
me, Paul.
it's the surname Kratz origin is a wool carder, somebody who
Oh,
pulls wool.
there you go.
There
There
you go.
you go.
Yeah,
There you
he
go.
lives up to reputation, doesn't he? Yeah.
He
Anyway,
certainly does. Yep.
you know, thanks for as I say, thanks, Doctor, for joining me.
No, thank you. Thank you for
And
inviting me.
and we had a few words earlier about Sunday morning for you, which was Saturday evening for me. Saturday 1 o'clock in on Crunch Island. And of course, one of the funny things we must point out is that I think it was a while before the dude actually got you to come and join him for a chat. In fact, it might have been Mammothon.
Yeah, yes, it was.
Yeah, and
It
yet,
was. It was Mammothon 2020.
yeah,
And I think we did appear together, but like as a third party, I think on
yeah,
some of your lives.
yeah,
And Ericosi was there as well. But
hmm,
I think really the only one-on-one chat that I had with him was on Mammothon 2020,
well,
and we discussed Brendan Dassey, and I'll never forget it because I had Ericosi in stitches, and
yeah,
it was really really funny, and yeah, it was a real surreal experience, and
yeah.
I'm so thankful that Richard invited me, Ericosi invited me to just give a few brief words on Brendan Dassey, and yeah, it was really really good fun.
But having said that, as I say, I remember you as being part of was it the chats that we used to have on Discord? And was it with the Wrecking Crew, or was it whatever it was
Um,
before that? The uh,
yes, yes,
various stuff
yes,
that I've seen you. Yeah,
yes. This was a couple of years ago when
yeah,
Ericosi was doing all the presentations. And of course, he talked a lot about the forensic evidence and all sorts of stuff, like, the blood in the RAV, the bullet, the DNA on the key, all those things. And I was very, very interested, of course, and it was like, wow. And I could remember spending a lot of time in chat. I
mhm.
never spoke. I just answered questions in chat and asked questions, and I was awesome. It was really good.
Yeah. I certainly remember you from very early on. The fact that you're from Adelaide, which is somewhere I've never been to, but I've heard such a
Yes.
lot about. Um, Also, as I've mentioned before, your surname being it Italian, but reminds me of a famous rock band. I said to the dude, I said, you do realise you've known Dr. Silkman for at least 2 years, have I? I said, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
You
Yes.
don't realise how small at times how small a community we've got. Oh, obviously we've got a very big one,
Yes.
but yeah. Anyway, as I say, thank you for
Yeah, that's right.
accepting the
And
invite to come and have
like I said, it's how things. Yeah.
the the thing is, as I was mentioned before, my wife Eunice has started re-watching all of Making a Murderer, which is something that I think
Yeah.
a lot of us do from time to time, don't we? We go back to see things that in a slightly different light.
No question.
Yeah,
I find that you can watch Making a Murderer 10 times.
yeah,
You'll pick up new stuff all the time, and you renew your hatred and you
yeah,
despise Ken Kratz and Fallon and Garn even more,
yeah,
and the judge.
yeah,
But yeah, you pick up. You're correct. You're correct, Paul. You pick up more things. The more you study, the more you read, the more you collaborate with other excellent researchers and other YouTubers.
Yep.
You pick up a lot of stuff for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things that struck me was, and this was even in series 2, the skullduggery of the state, and I'm reminded that Kathleen Zellner has publicly stated that, you know, that the behaviour of Ken Kratz goes beyond anything she has ever seen before in any case.
Yes.
What he gets up to, but I just thought to myself, you know, when you've got people like Sutkovich pulling the wool, pulling the carpet from under her like that, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe even Kathleen Zellner is finding out things about the legal system. So really, all I wanted to do was just go briefly through the various lawyers, defence lawyers that there have been, that have tried to help. You know, Stephen Brendan. The other thing I mentioned earlier was, you know, I feel it's a bit harsh to, you know, when I met Jerry in Amsterdam, the last thing he said was that, you know, he was going to be called as a witness in an evidentiary hearing regarding his ineffective assistance of counsel. And to me, that seems a very, very harsh term, because, to be honest, I think they more or less did everything that the best they could. But with the benefit of hindsight, it would have, you know, there are certain things that I feel could have been different. Now, it could be that the lawyers out there, you know, Travis and Tracy, they might say, well, you know, this is why they had to do this. You know, that's fine, you know, but I'm just looking at it from, you know, the perspective of, surely that can't be right. Surely that can't be right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I was going to say, it's going to be used by Zellner as another reason to go in front of the judge and just
absolutely
sort of say, well, look, you know, my client had, you know, he wasn't properly represented. It is harsh. It definitely is harsh. I mean, I've gone over Buting and Strang's testimonies many, many times, and in my opinion, they did a very, very good job under very trying circumstances, and hopefully we can discuss some of those tonight.
Absolutely. But starting off, we don't hear at all, do we, from the we hear from what the lady that was Steve's one of Steve's attorney. She famously refers to what a crock of
that's right,
Reese.
Reese.
I can't remember what her surname is, but in the actual trial in 85, it wasn't her that represented Steve, and of course it was Dennis Vogel versus this other fellow, and his name escapes me because I can't get past Judge Hazelwood. And yet he was found guilty. So how effective was his defense lawyer then?
Well, I haven't read much about the 1985 case. Basically, I think there are people trying to FOIA all the testimonies, and apparently something around about $5,000 in order to get all the transcripts. So it's not free. I think Foul Play has got some material on the 1985 case. There is Shariko Haynes' testimony on Foul Play on our library site. So come and have a look and check that out.
Sure.
To me, this is the seminal case to study, right? Because what you just said about the benefit of hindsight, you're correct. We know that he was innocent. So, and that's been proven. So what to me is interesting is how on earth did Vogel win the case when you had, I think it was 16 material witnesses,
Yes.
and the forensic evidence was really super shady.
Yeah.
And then you had the sheriff, Kasurik, being really personally involved in the case and putting a lot of pressure. So we really have to study that case, Paul,
Mm.
because it gives us the benefit of hindsight to see, okay, what did the defense attorney do? Did he do something wrong? Why was he defeated in this particular case? And so obviously the Vogel must have presented a very, very good case and properly bamboozled the judge and the jury. Remember, the only forensic evidence they had was a hair analysis
Yeah.
done by a very young Cherie Cohen at the time, right?
Yes.
And it's like they found, I think it was one hair on Stephen Avery's shirt, and they're able to compare it. We're talking about the Penny Bernstein case here, right? And
Yeah.
so they're able to compare it to a head hair. And Cherie Cohen said, well, yeah, there seems to be a match. And oh
Yeah.
my God, there seems to be a match. And that
Yeah.
was enough to sink him.
I know
Right?
it's just bogus nonsense, isn't it? You know,
Correct.
when
Correct.
you rewatch the beginning of the Innocence Files and you hear Peter Newfield talk about all the
Yes.
different sort of experts out there, and he just goes, and it's all junk.
Correct. Correct. We on that, Paul, we did a bit of a review of the Innocent Files. We looked at the first 3 episodes. I think it was the first 3, and they were all on bike mark analysis,
Oh.
right? And so that's another form of junk science, right?
Yes.
Same type of shenanigans that Cherie Cohen was doing back in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So all these black guys, African American, were put in prison for a very long period of time for horrendous crimes. And not only that, one of them, I believe, no, 1 or 2, were actually placed on death row.
Yeah.
And it took years to finally work out that the bite mark analysis was all bogus. DNA analysis freed these men. And of course, the person who had committed these horrendous crimes, he confessed.
Yeah.
Right? And one guy, I think, was in prison for, I think it was 37 years, a sailor, an American sailor.
Oh, yeah.
All due to bite mark analysis. So, we're talking about the mid 80s where DNA really was very, very primitive, and it was not advanced at all. It was these polymorphic markers, which is what I did my PhD in back in the 80s. That was very, very new, very, very new. And it really wasn't refined until much later, late 90s, when all these new kits were being devised. But the scary thing is, Paul, is that how many people are sitting in prison and are completely innocent due to very shoddy forensic work, and it's actually quite scary.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's difficult for us to put a figure on that, but
Correct.
if you go with between 5 and 10%, you're talking over 100,000 people.
Yes, correct. And it is very sad. The more shows I see, the more documentaries I see, the American judicial system is in huge, huge trouble. And it seems to me like the aim is, well, nab somebody, even if the forensic evidence is rather flimsy, put them in prison. Look, we'll put 10 people in prison. We know that 2 are innocent, but at least we got the other 8.
Yeah.
And it's a real weird mentality because Kathleen Zellner said, hey, you get put in prison under false pretenses, you're looking at 10 to 15 years before we can even hear the case.
Oh, yeah.
So it's very, very sad, Paul.
Which is obviously one of the reasons why a lot of people they realise the predicament they're in, and they just confess because they might be offered a plea deal.
A lot of deals, and and Ken Kratz with Kaczynski and O'Kelly, they tried the same stunt, and it's disgraceful when a prosecutor like Ken Kratz writes in his book, well, we told Brendan he should have taken the plea deal and he would have been out, I think, in 2021,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And imagine admitting to a horrendous crime that you never committed, but you're released out of prison early.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I am familiar. I've not read the book. I am familiar with huge parts of it. He also wrote that I lose no sleep over the conviction of Brendan Darcy.
Correct. And again, it's as happened with the Penny Bernstein case, where the Attorney General, when she wrote Peg Earl, when she wrote the big report, the police weren't to blame. It was the problem of the victim. The victim pointed out Stephen Avery. So we're all clear. And sort of Ken Kratz did the same thing by saying, well, he got some bad advice from his grandfather, because his grandfather said, Brendan, don't you dare admit to something that you never did.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to be hounded for the rest of your life, and you're going to be known as a sex offender and a killer.
Yes.
That's horrendous.
Absolutely. What I would say is that, having read The Innocent Killer by Michael Griesbach, and I think there is a general consensus that the book, for the first 2/3, is well written, because it deals with this wrongful conviction. And he does talk about the attorney that represented Stephen Avery at the trial, but his big problem was that he was up against the fact that you've got Stephen Avery from a scrapyard, you've got Penny Bernstein, who's got a family-run business in Manitowoc, And I think Judge Hazelwood talks about the dichotomy between, the two sides at trial. But Dennis Vogel very sneakily manages to get Penny Bernstein to sort of play out, role act the attack 3 times. So the jurors are left with this. This is a really horrible crime. Oh, and they found the person that did it.
Yes. You're right. The disequilibrium between the victim and the suspect is day and night. So Stephen Avery is just some scumbag who's committed all these past crimes, and it fits his profile beautifully. Oh, by the way, we nabbed him. How good are we? We know all the shenanigans that took place with the sheriff and other officers involving turning a blind eye to Gregory Allen. So again, we can talk for hours on that, but it goes to show that even if you have very good material witnesses, that count for nothing if you've got a very aggressive DA who pulls a stunt like, okay, Penny, show us what happened. And everyone would have seen those photos of all her black eyes and her scars and her bruising. That would have left a very lasting impression. And all the jury had to do was just turn their heads and look at Stephen Avery. He looked like a scruff, you know what I mean, unkempt. And they were thinking, oh, my God, this guy is a monster. And, of course, he had the trouble with his cousin, right, Sandra. And so, you go for 1 + 1 = 32 years, and everyone's happy. We got this violent man off the streets. We can all go to sleep now, right? So absolutely. I feel very sorry for the person representing Stephen, because he basically had the carpet pulled from under him. And, even the judge, basically got sucked into Vogel's presentation. And I'll tell you what, I would love to read those transcripts. That will be essential reading for all of us, for all students in wrongful convictions, because now, like you said, Paul, we have the benefit of hindsight. We can now look back at the testimonies and go, hey, you sneaky bugger. we couldn't do that before because we didn't know. In
Yeah.
85, you wouldn't have known. And like when I read Cherie Cohane's testimony, she would have been a young woman, right?
Yes.
In this big case. And I started laughing my head off when I was reading the test. Well, I think it looks the same. Well, come on. And Vogel was pressing her, right?
Yeah.
And the defense attorney was trying to make sense of all this hair analysis, but in the end, even he got bamboozled.
Yes.
You know, well, is it a match or isn't it a match? This hair's a match. This hair's not. Jeepers. Yeah. And she said, Paul, I've done hundreds of these cases.
Oh.
So how many people are sitting in prison from rubbish junk science?
Mm-hmm.
That's the scary part.
It is indeed, yeah. As you can say, there's so many sort of tangents that I could go off, but in terms of the Sandra Morris case, there's no dubiety there. Steve pled guilty to that.
Correct.
And
Correct.
Quite rightly was sentenced to 6 years for that.
Correct.
But to run alongside, you know. So let's fast forward to where obviously Steve Glynn and Walt Kelly get on board,
yes.
don't they?
Yes, they do.
And I think that's more to do with the civil suit side of things.
Yes, but also they were involved in the 1996 DNA testing.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
They got the sex kit, the fingernail scrapings, the pubic hair, and I'll tell you what, the shenanigans that took place there. Although DNA testing in 1996 was very, very primitive.
Yes.
Right, and when it was done by LabCorp, right, and they presented a beautiful case. The representatives of Stephen, they presented a really good. Look, we've got the sex kit now. We've got DNA testing. Let's go for it. But unfortunately, the DNA testing was very primitive. Mm-hmm. They only looked at 3 loci.
Yeah.
Like 3, right? And I proved that they made 2 mistakes as well.
Oh.
They made 2 typing mistakes. But I actually went through it from scratch. And they were honest mistakes because the technology back then was not that flash. It was still relatively new, right? But there was one allele that didn't belong to Penny and it didn't belong to Stephen. Right? And the Judge Hazelwood, and this is what you were saying. Because of Stephen's background, right? Yep. The judge looked at it and thought, well, I can either go this way or that way. Right?
Yes.
And he goes, I'm not convinced. Back to jail you go, mate.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, where did this extra allele come from? Right?
Yeah.
And the answer is, well, Penny could have touched one of her rescuers.
Yes.
But hold on, we're talking about someone viciously scratching someone, and the material was underneath your fingernail. Plus, she would have washed her hands, etc., for touch DNA. The judge was not convinced, and back to prison he went.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a very, very interesting situation in '96.
Yeah, I must admit, I have watched. I would say quite a few videos of yours where you talk about DNA and the complexities of it, and it is at times it is pretty complicated stuff.
Yes.
But luckily we have an expert in the field in the case of yourself, so that's you can keep us right on all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can look at it 2 ways, Paul. You can either say, look, I'm not interested in how you got the result. I just want the result. And that's Ken Kratz. Ken Kratz, he couldn't give a stuff what Cherie Cohane did. He just wants a brief summary. Is it yes or no? That's all. Yeah. Right? And that's the way that the attorneys presented it in the court. A nice PowerPoint slide, etc., etc. I'm the type of guy, I like to I like to know. So, once you understand the background, you can understand what Culhane was doing in the lab, right?
Yeah.
But to the attorneys, and you can imagine the jury, right? This is
Oh,
pretty heavy
yes.
stuff on
Yeah.
DNA. The jury would have been going, what the hell is all this about, right? And so you have to present it in a simplified fashion to say, oh, yeah, see this key? It belongs to Teresa Hallbart, and it's got Stephen Avery's DNA in it. That's all you need to know,
Yep.
right? The Hood
Yeah.
Lab, same type of stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I mean, when you look back at this stuff that they framed him with, and now Kathleen Zellner is completely destroying everything. It's almost like the poor cretins. They had no idea that their work was going to be so undermined. Years and years later.
Yes, and Paul, what you were saying about the lawyers, the limitation of the lawyers.
Yeah.
I think Jerome Buting did a really brilliant job on his questioning of Cherie Culhane, because when you think about it, the two critical witnesses for the state was Cherie Culhane, who did all the forensic analysis on the DNA and the blood, etc., and the other person, of course, was Dr. Eisenberg, who did all the analysis on the cremains, right? And Strang was brilliant in questioning Dr. Eisenberg, right? But if only they had a molecular biologist on the panel, right? They would have had a field day. They would have had a field day with Culhane. And you see, that's, if you're going to attack the case, that's where you needed to do it.
Yeah. Now, I must admit, I probably my favourite bit of interrogation, of questioning by the lawyers, would be Dean Strang asking Andy Colburn about writing reports. I mean, even the press later on the evening, you hear them saying, this is a guy that puts on a badge and a gun and goes to work every day. People are going to be, his kid's going to go to school, and the kids are going to come up and say, I saw your dad on TV. What a moron. He really did put him in. Anyway, sorry, we're digressing. I was going to ask you about, Mike Griesbach. It always struck me as being somewhat unusual for Mike Griesbach, who was the assistant attorney DA. But of course, a lot of people fail to remember that he actually won the election to become DA and decided that he didn't want to be DA and gave the job to Mark Roher. I don't think he's ever explained why that was. It didn't explain in the book, other than the fact that he had a change of heart and he decided that he would let. Anyway, I don't know if that has any significance in this at all. I just don't know that.
I'm not sure.
But what struck me as being a bit strange was the fact that even in Making a Murderer, we see how keen Mike Griesbach is to throw Dennis Vogel under the bus over the fact that Gregory Allen was in the file. And yet we know perfectly well that him and Roher had no intention whatsoever of telling Peg Leitzelager all about the 95-96 phone call.
Look, when it comes to politics and politicians, I understand DNA, but I can't understand the motivation of these politicians. You see it time and time again. Like Griesbach, he basically is like on a seesaw. He'll go to any side that makes him look really good. So on the one case, he's defending Stephen. It was really, really bad. And then when the murder case comes up, Steve, a true animal, this and this and this. So in other words, they vacillate depending on what is the flavor of the day. And in the end, it just looks so bad. At least with Ken Kratz, he give him credit. He maintained his consistency. He was an asshole from start to finish, if I'm permitted to use harsh language. And still today, right? Because you look you look at these guys, they can't change.
No.
They cannot change their opinion, no matter how much Kathleen Zellner finds and shows how wrong they were, right? So Ken Kratz had to write this book, but then he had to write version 2, right? Because all this new forensic evidence was being discovered by Kathleen Zellner and her experts. So he had to basically comment on each part of the forensic evidence. The best one was item FL, the bullet fragment, where he goes right at the beginning of the book. Item FL was the game changer.
Yes.
Right? In the end, he had to change. In the end, he had to change his thinking of item FL, because he goes, it never hit skull, it never hit bone. Oh, but somehow it went through her. You know, and this was the magic bouncing bullet theory, that it then hit some wood paneling and it got the wood shards into the bullet. So he's now in pure speculation land, right? Because he can't say, item FL, we're in big trouble with item FL. No, they can't. They can't.
No.
Yes.
No. It's actually it's somewhat comical, but it's also very grotesque to see the efforts to which they try and
correct
and try and make it seem as if there's a plausible reason for any of this, isn't it? You know, it is comical. You end up laughing about it. You know, the number of times I'll explain to somebody the basics of making a murderer, and at times you're laughing about it, and you think, but it's not that funny. It is not funny at all.
No,
but what they're allowed to get away with.
Yeah, correct. Because they're an attorney or a former attorney, and they were a former investigator, they believe that they've got license to say whatever they want to say to whoever. And like classic is Fassbender, right?
Yeah.
Every time he gets interviewed, all these journalists goes, well, you do realize that this confession of Brendan looks pretty well coerced. Do you think it was coerced? Do you think he was telling the truth? Yes, of course he was. Could you imagine if the chief investigator Fassbender goes, that read technique was pretty crap. I knew we shouldn't have used it.
Yeah.
They can't. They have to still persist with their garbage stories and garbage theories. And so what you were saying, Paul, right at the beginning about Buting and Strang, imagine if they had Chris Palahniuk on their team and they did forensic analysis on item FL. Can you imagine how embarrassing that would have been for the state to say, excuse me, but this bullet never went through bone. It didn't kill Teresa Hobart. No. So the question is, how do you account for wood shards, red paint, and wax being on this bullet? And it's got Teresa Hobart's DNA in it.
Yeah.
That looks mighty suspicious. There you go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's you touched on something there, the fact that a lot of these people, the media, give them such an easy ride, whereby, as you say, they ask, Fassbender this question is as if, do you really believe it? And he's just allowed to get off with a, oh yeah, it's a yes/no answer. There's no attempt to really scrutinize what they're saying. They just accept it. And again, you think, is that because that is how the press are meant to behave in this sort of political system almost?
Well, put it this way: if you upset them, in if you upset Kratz and you upset the et cetera, they won't talk to you anymore. So you've got to play an impartial type of line. Be very, very careful what you ask, and it's us, the viewers, that go, "What the hell's this guy on?"
Yeah,
and it's sort of like when Ken Kratz gave that press conference, right? One of the this is March the 2nd.
Yes.
One of the journalists said, "Well, is there any DNA backing up the kid's story?" And it's like Kratz thought, well, we're not going to go into that, and we've got this and we've got that. The reality is he had nothing.
Yeah.
it was all smoke and mirrors
Yeah.
designed to shock and awe, and that's precisely what it did.
Yeah.
Shock and awe. And
Yeah.
that's what put the defense attorneys of Stephen on the back foot immediately.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
annoy me the way that the state and Kratz in particular, and then Schimmel, they hide behind the holdbacks, and yet
All the time.
that press conference, the one of the main things, what he did to the Holbach family was terrible in giving that press conference, because part of his job is to protect the victim's family.
Correct.
And he did the complete. He couldn't care less
No,
about the Holbachs.
no. And in fact, Kathleen Zorn even said that's the worst. That's the
Yeah.
worst thing she's ever seen an attorney actually do.
Mhm.
And it's really a prosecuting attorney actually do. And I forgot the name of the gentleman, but she actually hired a professional professor
Yeah,
of law to go through everything of Ken Kratz. And it's
Yeah.
like 20 pages, page after page of all the garbage that he did throughout
Yeah.
the trials. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God. And why didn't the judge sanction him and said, mate, you can't get away with this crap. How
Yeah.
are we going to get it? How are we going to get an impartial jury pool? You can't, right?
yeah,
And that changed the opinion of people. Even if it's in think twice, right? You're going to think twice. That's shocking. And if I could just say, Ken Kratz works from the principle, right?
Yeah.
It's better to beg for forgiveness than seek permission.
Mm.
So he goes, I know it was wrong, but I still did it. And then I said, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah,
But the damage was done.
Yeah.
The damage was done.
Yeah. I actually put it to Jerry Buting. I said, why was Judge Willis so sort of obedient to everything that Ken Kratz wanted? And I said, could it be that because Ken Kratz was at one point he was the chairman of the Wisconsin Crime Victims' Rights Board, and I said to Jerry, I said, could it be that he's got something on Patrick Willis? And he said, no, you're overcomplicating it, Paul. It was Patrick Willis was up for re-election.
Right.
You're just, Paul. You're getting too complicated. You're overthinking this. No, it was nothing to do with that. It was simply the fact Patrick Willis up for re-election, high-profile case.
Yes, and you see that's why for someone like myself from Australia, I don't understand the structures and the behind the scene pork barreling and all that sort of stuff for re-election. But it's amazing because we did a lot of analysis on Brendan Dassey, right?
Yeah.
And throughout all his trials and tribulations, and the one key person that kept on following him to make sure that all the judgments fell the state's way was Brad Schimmel.
Yeah.
Right? He appealed everything. Whenever something went to for Ryder and Drizzen,
Yep.
the first person that stuck up his hand, we're going to appeal this, was Brad Schimmel. Right? Yeah. He had the option of just walking away and accepting the en banc panel and also accepting Judge Duffin. No. In fact, he criticized them.
Yeah.
Right? And it's remarkable, but you see, to me, I just see nothing but corruption.
Mm-hmm.
People meddling until they get the answer that they want. And if you notice how Brad Schimmel portrayed Brendan as an extremely dangerous person.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like Hannibal Lecter. Right? We've got to protect our society. Yet, where was that same sentiment when Gregory Allen was raping women for 10 years?
Yeah.
Right. All of a sudden, everyone forgot it. No one cared. Right. Yeah. So to me, it's extremely disgraceful.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I believe it's somewhere around about middle of January 2006. Um, I'm sure you've heard it as well. It's the phone call between Laura Riccardi and Stephen Avery, where he says to Steve, "Why did you settle? Why did you settle this civil suit?" And for me, I just can't help thinking that when we hear at the end of episode one, you know, we told Stephen Avery to expect lots of things. What we never told him was that you better watch out because you could be arrested for murder. And I just wonder if do you think there's a possibility that those lawyers, Glynn and Kelly, got a touch of cold feet and thought, this is what they're capable of doing in this case.
Well, possibly. And you
Possibly.
know what's even worse, in my opinion? The
Right.
Innocence Project gave up on
Yes.
Stephen.
Yeah.
Right? They pulled his picture down. I think they pulled a lot of information down. Some of them might have thought, look, if we support him again, they
Yeah.
may put the heat on us so much that we
Yeah.
can't get anybody else out of
Yes. Yeah.
prison, right? So there's all this very extremely powerful forces at
Yes.
play, right? And I think Stephen's cousin, Kim Ducat, said, if you thought they were going to just hand over $36 million to Steve, you got to be kidding. And of course, what happened? He got pinned for a murder,
Yeah.
right? Now, I think, like I said, because I don't understand the local politics, people who live there must comprehend and must understand that if you bring a civil lawsuit
Yeah.
against the MTSO, the former sheriff, and the prosecuting DA,
Yeah.
they're not going to stand by and sit and just watch it happen.
Yeah.
These guys are very powerful.
Yeah.
And who was it? Peterson? He said, if we wanted him dead, we'd just shoot him.
Yes.
Right? On national TV. Don't worry. And then Herman acting like Nostradamus, saying, well, you see, we should have kept Stephen in prison
Oh yeah.
because because Teresa Orbach may still be alive, but that at the expense of having Gregory Allen still continue doing whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
So it is, the local politics are bizarre. I don't understand them, but I'm telling you now, Stephen encountered some very nasty, very powerful people, and bang, they got him. They got him good and proper.
Well, yes. You know, as you say, Herman with his his touch of Nostradamus. That was nearly as good as when he's struggling for a word.
Correct, but you see the contrast, and we did it right. We did an episode. On the one hand, when he was in prison, Herman was laughing his head off, very smug, very confident. And then in the other episode, he showed a big, thick folder of all the complaints against the MTSO, saying, you're going to die, we're going to burn this place. And what is scary now is have a look at the way people are responding in Wisconsin now. They're burning police stations, they're rioting, they're looting. Wisconsin needs something good to happen, right? It can't. People this pandemic has made people go bizarre and insane. They're not going to stand for injustices anymore. People are going to fight back. People are walking around the streets, Paul, with semi-automatic weapons.
Oh.
I'm looking at this in Australia going, you got to be joking. Citizens shooting at each other with high-powered weapons. No, it's not good. It's not good.
No, I mean, I could definitely delve into the in the politics there, which to me it seems that there is such animosity between the two sides that if you gave a load of Democrats guns and you gave a load of Republicans guns, they would quite happily go on a hill somewhere and have a battle between them.
Correct.
They
and
would.
I think, correct. And I think that type of attitude was pervasive throughout the Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey trial. That's sort of like this big battle between the attorneys. And so I don't think Strang and Buting really knew what they were up against.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
See, the big mastermind was not Ken Kratz. The big mastermind was Fallon, because he's the one that kept everything in check, right? Did you see the volumes of books that he had on his desk? Anytime the defense came up with some type of statement that the state didn't like, Fallon immediate judge, and he quotes some law. You can't do that. Oh, this looks like a Denny suspect to me. So everything that the state could do to hobble the defense, they did. They did. And if I could just make the point, Paul, and this is remarkable, right? One thing that wasn't done, and a lot of people will agree, is that a proper victimology wasn't done of Teresa Orbach, right? And it was deliberate, because the state came in and presented this beautiful, young, athletic woman with a fantastic career, a love of life, etc., etc. And compared to this evil, wife-bashing, cat-burning monster, right? And so you had this massive contrast. But without doing the proper victimology, you couldn't really get into her lifestyle that potentially could have put her at risk, right? And you and I, we've seen all these programs of investigations, cold cases, right?
Absolutely.
And the British are remarkable at doing these investigations. They look at the victim, and the first thing they say is, who did the victim know? I want to talk to boyfriends, girlfriends, mum, father, cousins, ex-lovers, currently, they start from the inside and they work out. And in the majority of cases, it's someone that the victim knows.
Absolutely.
But in this case, in the Steve Avery case, they started at the outside and they didn't bother going in, right? They started at the outside. They said, yep, him. Stephen Avery, nobody else. And you could tell by the police transmissions, we got a body, is he in custody? Have we got him under arrest? That's before even a trial started.
I know.
They knew. Everything was in my opinion, it was preordained, pre-worked out. All they needed was the phone call from Pam of God. Boom. Everything sprung into action. Have you ever seen people descend on one place like the salvage yard? I reckon they drained the whole county. Everyone says, boys, let's head down there, because it was huge number of people for one missing person. And that's amazing. So in my opinion, we were talking about the lawyers, a lack of proper victimology, and when Buting started to hint about her lifestyle, Ken Kratz wrote in his book, I wanted to get up and punch Buting in the nose, because he dared challenge a good Christian girl for doing potentially nefarious activities, right? And Ken Kratz was so upset that he wanted to knock out Buting. Now, how are you going to get to the truth if you don't ask, well, what was the victim into? What type of activity did she do? And you know what? What's amazing was that Tom Pierce, her boss, kept on saying, Teresa kept on getting these harassing phone calls day in, day. No one said, oh, maybe she's got a stalker. Maybe she's got someone, a jilted lover, or someone who wanted to do it. No one gave a damn.
No, actually, funny. You mentioned about the, as you say, the guy pulling up at the salvage yard. Do we have a body yet? No. Do we have Stephen Avery in custody yet? No. And it's like, all we've got is a missing person. But It always struck me as being funny how you've got likes of Peterson in his depositions. They ask him about other people. Given he's the sheriff, he's the head of the department. He claims he doesn't know about any of his other officers. Given I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't know about when Colburn and Lankin. I wouldn't know about when Zurich and Vogel and Duke. And yet the whole department knows that this whole investigation is about nailing Stephen Avery.
Correct. Because I saw a documentary where I think it was Dr. Phil talking to him. Because what document that I stuck in my safe? I don't know of a document. And you see, what everyone was doing, they were putting away ammunition just in case the hit the fan. So everyone was putting all this stuff away. Like Cherie Cohen had that note from Fassbender saying, put her in the garage. She could have easily turned around and said, see, it's not my fault. They told me they wanted these results, and away you go, right? Yeah. But what is incredible was when Peterson, I think it was Peterson, when he was questioned about the 2003 exoneration, right? Yeah. I think it was Buting saying, well, he was exonerated. Yeah. That means that he didn't do it. Oh, I don't know about that. So Peterson wasn't convinced. And I'm telling you now, even Couchet was, and there must be a whole heap of them in the MTSO thinking, I reckon that Gregory Allen and Stephen Avery raped her. Yeah. Right? They can't let it go. No. Right? They can't admit that they made a mistake because it's horrendous. Right? So that's the attitude of those guys.
Well,
that's the attitude of those guys.
Yeah, I would speculate though that it's not a case of they don't want to be called for making a mistake. They don't want to be called for the fact that they deliberately, as Tom Zurich said to Stephen Avery, I don't care whether you did it or not. I'm going to get you for it. It's that deliberateness of it, isn't it?
This was so deliberate, so overt. I can't understand why 10 to 15 of those officers are not sitting in prison or heavily fined. And that's exactly what the civil suit was going to do, right? So it was a degree. The guilters are going, come on. Is the MTSO really going to be that desperate to pin a murder on him? Well, absolutely. Yes. The whole MTSO, most of those guys would have lost their pension.
Yep.
They would have been sued. They would have lost their houses, their careers, and some of them would have ended up in prison. Yeah. But here's the other catch. Every prisoner who got put in prison because of Cherie Cohen and all her so-called forensic analysis, every prisoner is going to say, oh, yeah, she did my case. I want it retried.
Absolutely.
You could imagine Manitowoc would have been doing retesting for 200 years, and the civil lawsuits from everyone would have amounted to billions.
Absolutely.
So they knew these guys aren't silly. They would have known, we need to stop it, and we need to stop it now.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. So that's why these guys here, they could use Stephen Avery as a real nasty guy. And it was so easy to frame him that by the time everyone worked out what had happened, the guy's in prison. Same with his nephew.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, absolutely. Yes, desperate people do desperate things. No question.
Yeah. This whole civil suit business, it's not a pretty thing. It's an ugly thing from the police point of view. We see it, don't we, at the start of that murder in the park, where the detective is saying, we got this old story, old story Simon. No, he was the other one. Anthony Porter. We've got this Anthony Porter. We've got the right guy. They let him out, and now we're facing, this civil suit, and we've got to give details of what we own, what money we have, what savings we have, assets, all this kind of stuff. So that somebody that's guilty can take it all from us.
Correct. Correct.
And you saw that the sort of I say it's not a pretty thing, and I can't help imagining that with Stephen Avery actually being sat there with Glyn and Kelly at the depositions, the hatred
Correct.
towards him.
Look,
How dare you try and do this to us? We will sort you out big time.
yeah, but not only that. Remember, Stephen Avery was with all the politicians on the stand, on the pulpit.
Absolutely.
And, you know, these are all guys dressed in suits,
Yeah.
right? Guys, these are higher echelon. And here we have Stephen Avery with shorts and his hands in his pocket. He must be thinking, you guys are going down for this, right? But he maintained his composure. All he had to do was just shut up. Now think about this, right? The last person in Wisconsin to even touch a hair on Teresa Halbach's head is Stephen Avery, right?
Yeah.
The last person in Wisconsin that would harm anyone is Stephen Avery. And who out of the whole of Wisconsin gets pinned for a brutal murder on a 25-year-old is the only person who's got a $36 million lawsuit against the county, the ex-sheriff, and the DA, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I think we need to discuss about the lawyers and the strategy and what they got wrong, right, in terms of the Stephen Avery trial. Because I think they did a brilliant job, but they did a couple of bad mistakes.
I think you've just let yourself in for a part 2 of this at a future date.
Oh, no.
I think you've just talked yourself into that one, but that was exactly what I was thinking. It's now nearly an hour, and it seems to have flown by as usual.
Always a pleasure.
Let's do this again either later on this week or maybe even beginning of next week, and let's carry on and look at Dean and Jerry, Driz and Nyrider, and Zellner.
I think that's a really good segue because now we can, with the benefit of hindsight, like you said, we can now look back, and the irony is, I think there were a couple of lawyers and maybe even the judge who said, "Well, boys, you should have said this instead of this."
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, now the state's telling the defense how they should have done their presentation.
Oh, yeah.
So we can discuss that in part 2.
Excellent.
For sure.
Well, anyway, listen, take care. I hope that your team can start to rise the table.
What did you spoil the interview for? We weren't talking about sport. No sport.
Hey, do you know on Friday it's the T20 internationals? England versus Australia start again.
That'll be awesome.
It will be.
Awesome. I told the boys, sew up your pockets and no sandpaper.
Yeah. Yeah, and not doing a Michael Atherton and putting some dirt on the ball.
Crazy.
I know.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Yeah,
very enjoyable.
Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to let's do it same time next week.
That sounds awesome.
Right.
That sounds awesome. And and thank you very much, Paul. And remember, guys, I'm part of the Foul Play team. Come along, check out our stuff.
Absolutely.
We have lots of discussions, and everyone's welcome. And again, thank you very much, Paul. And also a big thank you for streaming the Richard's ceremony. Very, very touching, very, very moving, and oh boy,
yeah,
very, very. It was surreal watching it.
You know, when you've got channels like Foul Play that when I think of the time that when the dude wore his kilt and made a video about trying to encourage people to come forward and make their own videos, and you see the number of people that have done that and the lengths to which they've gone and how they've grown I think the dude would be absolutely beaming to think, you know, that there are so many people out there doing videos, but some channels that are doing really well. You know, obviously Foul Play, fantastic stuff. You know, I'll keep bobbing along, but you know, it's all about, you know, shining that spotlight on those that don't want the spotlight shone on them. So yeah, keep up the good work, Foul Play.
No, pleasure. Thank you so much, Paul. Much
Okay.
appreciated.
Yep.
Take care.
We'll see you next week, if not before.
We'll do. Take care.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Yeah. Bye for now. Bye bye.
Ciao.